Good evening from Washington, D.C. I'm Vaughn Hilliard in for our friend Chris Hayes tonight. And folks, it's Tuesday, which means it is election night in America once again. And polls have just closed this last minute in Florida, where we are covering a bunch of important and dynamic races. We can now project that Byron Donalds, a MAGA acolyte of Donald Trump, will be the Republican gubernatorial nominee in the state of Florida. He will face off against David Jolly, the former Republican congressman who left the GOP after Trump's election. At the top of the marquee race tonight is the race to replace the state's term-limited Governor Ron DeSantis. That is the race. Crucially, DeSantis, he did not endorse in the Republican primary. But as we are watching here, these results come in, Byron Donalds efficiently pulling off a sizable margin of victory over the likes of this candidate, James Fishback, somebody who was a controversial figure within the Republican Party. There was speculation at one time that DeSantis' wife would run for office. That never actually came to fruition. But with the AP projecting that Byron Donalds has won the Republican gubernatorial race here in Florida for a general election that is going to be about 2.5 months in the making here, he did receive the endorsement of Donald Trump. He is somebody who was once floated as a potential Speaker of the House. He's also an election denier who voted to overturn and object to the 2020 election results, one of his first major actions upon entering Congress in 2021. He faced a crowded Republican field, including James Fishback. We could spend a long time tonight about the offensive racist comments he's made during this primary campaign, including calling Donalds, who would be Florida's first black governor, quote, a slave to donors and a DEI Republican. Despite those appeals to MAGA identity politics, he didn't win the nomination, but we wanted to see what ultimately the share of his vote here tonight would look like. And we're looking at about 10%. This was a big question mark, not just for society as a whole, but within the Republican Party about just how far right, just how many voters were looking to somebody that spewed racism and often anti-Semitic rhetoric on the campaign trail quite openly. On the Democratic side, the gubernatorial nominee may be a familiar face to viewers of this network, former Republican Congressman David Jolly. He left the GOP following the first election of Donald Trump. Jolly will be the second consecutive Democratic gubernatorial nominee to have defected from the opposition after Charlie Crist lost to Ron DeSantis in 2022. Jolly decisively pulling off this Democratic nomination. There were other candidates that had been in the race before backing out. In Jolly, the one-time Republican, winning by a sizable margin here tonight. David Jolly, will join us here later from Miami, from his campaign rally there. We'll be talking to him in just a bit. But we're also following the state Senate race, which has flown under the radar. AP now projects that incumbent Ashley Moody will be the nominee in the special election. This is to finish out the final 2 years of Secretary of State Marco Rubio's term. We can project on the other side, on the Democratic side, that state legislator Angie Nixon, who has the endorsement of a number of progressive groups and legislatures, she has defeated Alexander Vindman, who folks will recall was the whistleblower from Donald Trump's first impeachment. This is a major victory for the progressive movement down in Florida. This is, of course, it's a deep red state over the course of the last few election cycles, and Moody is heavily favored to win in November. But her low-profile campaign still has some Republicans worried in the state, with one anonymous party activist telling Politico this month, quote, she has got all the cards in her favor. She's a sitting senator backed by the two most popular people in Florida, Trump and DeSantis. Yet despite all that, she seems incapable of capitalizing on it. There are also a number of very interesting House races in the Sunshine State that we're watching the results come in for. On the Democratic side, Congressman Jared Moskowitz, who has earned some criticism for his hardline pro-Israel views, is facing a primary challenge from Oliver Larkin, a Democratic socialist. We're looking at the results there, and it appears that we have projected the winner of this race to be Jared Moskowitz in his race against the Democratic socialist Oliver Larkin here. We're also are looking at 11-term Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who currently represents Florida's 25th district, which was reformed in the Republicans' mid-cycle redistricting scheme earlier this year. We are now looking at the results in real time. You're looking at it with me. She has, in fact, won the nomination in the state's new 20th district. Now, this is notable. She jumped over into this different district and entered what was a crowded primary field of several black candidates in this plurality black district. Wasserman Schultz, who is white, she had taken some heat for that decision as black voters across South Florida worry their votes were diluted as a result of the Republican gerrymandering earlier this year during that redistricting effort. And regardless, we were looking at the results here, and she nearly pulling off 50% of the vote share there. Next door, in the state's 19th district, we're going to look over at the Republican side, and let's just say we're going to watch this race because these are the candidates fighting it out. Madison Cawthorn, remember that guy? Well, he's in the running to return to Congress after losing his seat in North Carolina. You might recall him for his fervent denial of the 2020 election results or for his unsubstantiated claims that prominent Republicans engaged in drug-fueled sex parties. Well, he moved to Florida, and he's taking on a former New York congressman. Yes, I said New York. This former congressman moved to Florida, too. But this one, he's Chris Collins, who was sentenced to 26 months in prison for insider trading in 2020. Well, so how can he run here? Well, he was pardoned by Trump that same year before Trump left office. Collins is one of two candidates on the ballot in that district pardoned by the president because, well, also running is John Strand. He's a January 6th defendant who breached the U.S. Capitol and spent about a year in federal prison before receiving his pardon. Meanwhile, in the state's 7th district, the embattled Republican Congressman Corey Mills is trying to hold on to his seat. He's under an ethics investigation for allegations of domestic abuse, which he denies. He's also facing claims of campaign finance violations, which he also denies. MS Now reported just last month he's even under DOJ investigation. Should Mills make it out of this primary, Democrats see his district as a potential flip opportunity in November. Now, outside of Florida, we know a bunch of you are voting elsewhere too, and our team is keeping very close tabs everywhere, including for folks way out west and way up in the north, including over in Alaska, a place where Democrats hope Mary Peltola could expand their Senate map potentially. It's kind of a strange system in Alaska where everyone runs in the same primary today, regardless of party, and then the top four candidates, they'll run again against each other in a ranked choice election system in November. Now, interestingly, Senator Dan Sullivan, the Republican incumbent, well, get this. So he's not the only Dan Sullivan on the ballot. Alaska, you're about to get a lot of special attention in the months ahead in what we expect to be a big race and one that Democrats hope to potentially have an opportunity to pick up a seat in. And over in California, there is a runoff election in the Democratic primary to replace the former Congressman Eric Swalwell. AIPAC is spending millions against progressive state Senator Aisha Wahab, who is running against the more moderate Melissa Hernandez. But we begin this evening, as we started, with the results that you guys were all watching in real time with me on the screen. Florida, Florida, Florida. Ali Velshi is MS Now's chief data reporter, and he joins me at the big board. Ali, you were getting these numbers in one big batch here at the same time.
Yeah.
At the top of the ticket, could we start there with the governor's race when we're looking at the questions around Byron Donalds and whether he was going to be able to pull off a primary victory? Can you take us into the numbers of what you're seeing?
Absolutely. And by the way, Florida has two time zones, so you can see everything here is in the central time zone. So this part of the state's been closed for an hour, which is why we are able to get the statewide races as quickly as we are. Byron Donald, this is kind of amazing. When you look at this in his race for governor, 81% in, he's now the projected winner with 48.8% of the vote. He's running against a whole bunch of people, and that wasn't enough to actually split the vote enough. I mean, it'd be kind of amazing if he wins with more than 50% of the vote. Byron Donalds, as you said, election denier, very MAGA guy, was in the front run as the speaker before Mike Johnson won. Remember, there were all those votes about that. So Byron Donalds is going to be the Republican candidate for governor. David Jolly with 84% in. He's way ahead of the pack. I mean, there are a bunch of people running against him, but with 84% in, he's already at 61.6, and the Associated Press has called him the victor in that race. The Senate on the Democratic side, this is interesting. Alexander Vindman has been the higher profile guest, the higher profile candidate. As you remember, he's the one that kicked off Trump impeachment #1. He was in the room where the phone call was made with Donald Trump to Volodymyr Zelensky, in which he sort of said he wanted dirt on the Bidens. He went public with that. He and his brother were both, as a result, drummed out of their positions in the administration. His brother, now a congressman in Virginia, Alexander Vindman, trying to become the United States senator. That's not going to happen now. The Associated Press has predicted that Angie Nixon is going to be the candidate there. And, of course, Ashley Moody, as you mentioned, with 83% in, the Associated Press has confirmed that the incumbent who replaced Marco Rubio will be the Republican in that race. And again, I want to show you there were, a few people running in that race. To a couple of the House races that you were just talking about, on the west side of Florida, in the 19th district, with 98% in, Jim Schwartzwell has been projected the winner with just 30% of the vote. As you mentioned, very exciting race around here, which is why he's a projected winner with just 30% of the vote. His closest competitor is Christina Loff with 21.8. Madison Cawthorn, not really clear why he's running for a seat in Florida, 8.5%. Chris Collins, former congressman from New York, not really sure why he's running in Florida, 7.4%. John Strand. So with a lot of splitting in that vote, you've still got Jim Schwartzel running ahead there. He's winning. Let's go to the Atlantic coast over here. A couple of very interesting races you talked about. In the 25th, this goes all the way from Miami, Sunny Isles Beach, Hallandale, Hollywood, and into Fort Lauderdale on the ocean side. Jared Moskowitz with 86% in, 64% of the vote. He is the projected winner there against Oliver Larkin, taking him on as a Democratic Socialist and as somebody whose views on Israel are very different. The 20th district. Now, this is interesting. Debbie Wasserman Schultz. This is not her district. She moved in here. It was redistricted. 82% in. She's got 47.8% of the vote. This is very interesting because this is a district that has about 40% of the vote is black, but all of the other candidates in this race were black. They've all split the vote. It's unclear if she gets 47.8%, if she gets more than 50% of the vote or not. And I want to go to the 7th district right now. Let me get there. Here we go. 7th district. Right now, I think we've got a call coming in right now. Yes, Ryan Elijah is the projected winner with 82% in. This, of course, you mentioned is Corey Mills. He's the incumbent there. Got all sorts of problems in DOJ investigation potentially and an ethics investigation. 34.4% of the vote. However, he's still got a pretty good turnout there. But at 46.9%, Ryan Elijah will be the Republican candidate in the 7th district of Florida. So we got a lot more coming in right now. We're going to get Alaska a lot later in the night. But I got to say, for people who like politics and who like data and who like all the complexities about voting, Alaska is going to be a great one to watch. Ranked choice voting, two people with the same name running on a ballot. Mary Peltola, a very interesting story. And remember, this is a state in which Lisa Murkowski was not on the ballot. People wrote her name on the ballot and spelled it correctly, and she became a United States senator. So I would say stay up late and watch Alaska tonight as well.